Jaap de Koning, ο οποίος είναι οικονομολόγος, μηχανικός κατασκευών, διαθέτει 25ετή εμπειρία στο τομέα των διαγωνισμών, της σύναψης συμβάσεων και της διαχείρισης έργων στο κλάδο των υποδομών και των κατασκευών και επίσης είναι πρόεδρος της Επιτροπής Εσωτερικής Αγοράς της ΕΦΚΑ στις Βρυξέλλες. Είναι επικεφαλής του ομίλου Contracting and Procurement και διευθυντής του γραφείου της εταιρείας Witte Wien Bosch στο Αμστερντάμ. Να πάρει το λόγο. Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
I think your introduction was positive, but I couldn't understand you. Sorry. And I used Google Translate just to translate the title of my introduction. I don't know what it says, but I'm going to talk about developments in Europe on contracting and procurement. So I hope you have the same expectations. This is me. Not going to talk about everything. I only have 15 minutes, and you'll get the slides, so if you want to know more, just contact me. But my field of work, that's why I'm standing here, is contracting and procurement. And I'm doing it at my job, but I'm also doing that at EFCA. I'll tell something more about EFCA. And important for this lecture is also the last one. I'm chairing the board of our pension fund, so I'm also about money. And I like that because I have a double background. I'm an economist and I'm a constructional engineer. So I'm doing both. I'm working at Witte Wien Bosch. We are an engineering company, quite classical. These are the type of projects we do. We are mainly in infrastructure. So the roads, new land, rivers, dikes, tunnels, that sort of thing. That's what we do. And most of my colleagues are technicians, and they calculate and they design. That's what they do. We are quite old. We are based in 1946, and at the moment 1,200 employees, about 950 in Holland and the rest abroad. The turnover is about 130 million euros, and what I always think is important, we are owned by ourselves. So we're not on the stock market. We don't have other financing institutions. All the shares are with the employees. And 80% of the employees have shares with Witte Wien Bosch. And that is still a very positive effect on the population, because even if you have a very small amount of shares, still the company is yours. And the positive effect is that all the profit we make is going back to the employees. So you get your salary, and if you work hard enough, you also get a part of the profit. It works very good. And the positive effect is we can be independent. We don't have to listen to financial institutions in order to make some sort of margin. No, we are independent in our course and in our own policy. What we find very important is sustainability. So in all types of, all themes, we like to put it out. We have electric cars, we have Meatless Monday. So if you come to us on Monday, you won't get any meat, just vegetarian, in order to get people realize what it means if you produce meat. We have all our offices near a train station, so we try to stimulate using public transport and not come by cars. So we really like to emphasize that sustainability for us is very important, not only in the projects where we have certain principles of sustainable development, sustainable design, but also in the company ourselves. Okay, EFCA, that's what I'm standing here for. I'm representing the Internal Market Committee. As Jan van der Putten has already explained yesterday, how does EFCA work? EFCA is a big organization based in Brussels, 25 branch organizations, almost all the member states are member, and we have certain committees, and one of the important ones here is the Internal Market Committee, which I'm chairing. We lobby, we make guidances, we try to implement European rules, we help member states in implementing them. And this was one of the big projects in 2014. We tried to lobby on the new directive on the procurement, as you can see, the 3 directives. And we were a little bit successful, we think. Okay, recent developments in Europe. I'll start with my message, and the message is ECI, early contractor involvement. That's what we see happening. And I'll explain later what I mean by this term. And the second message is procurement is the key to change. That's very important, especially for our clients in infrastructure, mainly the government, of course. You should use procurement in a strategic way. It's not only legal, it's not only procurement for a certain staff in your company. No, it's a strategic element, and you should use it in order to gain your policies. Okay, the big picture. You probably recognize this one. This is the last report from the IPCC, just being presented in Monaco, and it's not a very happy conclusion, because it says the rise of the sea levels is going even faster than we thought. As a comparison, in the last century, the level rise was 15 centimeters, and now the pace has doubled. So the sea levels are really rising a lot. They are rising fast. And this is only sea level rising. It's also heating up the atmosphere with all sorts of consequences. And I think that the climate change is the biggest, far by the biggest challenge we face in the coming years. And concerns the whole world, not just Greece, not just the European Union or Holland. No, it demands really something of our society, all the people around the world. This climate change is very threatening, and we can do something about it. That's always the message. If we act now, it's much cheaper than acting in 20 or 40 years. So there's also a very big element of money involved. Are we willing to produce, are we willing to invest now in measures, or are we waiting, see what happens, and then try to compensate on the climate change, the effects of climate change? And money is not the problem. There's money enough in the world. Just to give you a broad picture, our pension fund of Witte Van den Bos, my company, has about 170 million euros on the bank. That's what we have. A lot of money, right? I just put it down, all the zeros, and just counted them. This is 170 million. It looks a lot of money. But in Holland, we are only a small pension fund, because if you add up all the money of all the pension funds in Holland, we have this kind of money. This is what we saved in Holland since the 1950s, when we started with our pension funds. It's an enormous amount of money. It's 1,450 billion euros. That's what we have. And what do we do with it? We invest, of course, and we try to make margin on our investments, because we have to pay our pensioners in the future. And for Witte Van den Bos, we decided years ago already to invest in index funds, because we realized that investing and trying to beat the stock market is not possible. So we only have index funds. So we only follow the stock markets. That's what we do. That's enough. And we do that in a company called Vanguard. And I don't know if you know Vanguard. Who knows Vanguard? Ever heard of them? Not much of you. They have an enormous amount of money invested around the world. $5,200 billion. That's huge, and they are second in the world after BlackRock. And Vanguard is quite special, because they only have index funds. So they don't try to beat the market. No, they only have index funds. So they just follow the market, and they still make a good margin. And why am I telling this? Because twice a year we invite Vanguard to talk to us as a pension fund, and they tell us what they're doing. And already last year, they told us that they realized, and not only Vanguard, also the big pension funds, that climate change affects profits in the future. And Vanguard is a long-term investor. So they're not just thinking about next year, no, they're thinking about in 30, 40 years. And they realize that climate change, if we don't do anything, it will really affect the profits. So that scares them. So they're moving, they're becoming aware. And what they're doing is they visit big clients, and then the really big clients, like the Shells of this world. And they have conversations in the boardroom, and they're asking all these companies, what are you going to do about climate change? So they're putting pressure on the companies they invest in and trying to act on climate change. Another important message was that they did some analysis on data, and they have very, very, very big data. and they just mixed up new funds and sustainable funds, and they just counted what does it do with our profits, and it didn't do much. So the image of sustainability is expensive and it will low down your margins is just not true. It hardly affects profits. So they started SRI funds, socially responsible investments, and in these funds they are looking for companies that are willing to invest in sustainability, and they also exclude companies. So they exclude companies that are doing in weapons. They're also excluding companies in the tobacco industry. And now they're thinking about looking at companies that are in the fossil industry. Because in their view, fossil industry is a dead-end road in the end. Because fossil industry is, well, leading nowhere. So that's a very interesting thing happening at Vanguard. And why is it important for me? Because I think in wanting to make a change, money is power. If you have the money behind you in the right direction, then things will move. Otherwise, if you're only depending on politicians or governments, it's going slowly. If this is happening really in the big world, then it's important. So you should realize that if these big funds are moving in the right direction, you can help them. You can go in the same direction. And how do you use this money? It said before yesterday, PPP, public-private partnerships. That was what we have been doing for years. Now, what is going on in public-private partnerships? This is Margaret Thatcher, as you might recognize her. She passed away, sadly, but she was, in her days, a big promoter of public-private partnerships. Because in her terms, in the 80s, in the last century, there was a problem, there was a crisis in England. The government didn't have any money, and companies didn't have any work. So what was the solution? You know, we defined projects, and we let them finance by the companies. So that's how we got DBFMs, design, build, finance, and maintain. So they made long-term contracts, 20, 30 years, and it covered all of the work. The design, the construction, but also financing and even maintaining and even operate, DBFMO. And they called them private financed initiatives. So that's what they started. And in 2011, there was already a report for the House of Commons which said, well, these PFIs, they are not so positive in every way. We expected them that things got cheaper, that the quality would rise, and so on. In most of the cases, that didn't happen. In fact, a lot of DBFM projects were quite expensive. They were not flexible. If you wanted to change something, it was very expensive. Quality was not at the highest level. On the contrary, sometimes quality was lower than you would have expected in a normal project. So they turned down, not completely, but a lot of PFIs ended then, and they didn't start any new PFIs, but there were still PFIs. Until 2018, Carillion went bankrupt. And Carillion was the second largest contractor in England, about 8 billion turnover yearly, so a really big company. And they suddenly went bankrupt. And Carillion had a lot of DBFM projects, contracts. So what happened? Especially on the operate side, hospitals had a problem because there was no maintenance on the installation. So there was a problem with keeping everything tidy. There was a problem with airports because Carillion did the security. It just stopped. There was a problem at schools. Kids didn't have lunch anymore because Carillion had that in the contract. So they found out that the consequences of these contracts could be very heavily in society. So what they said in 2018 in November, the central government forbid PFIs. So in England, there won't be any new PFIs. So that's an important signal for me. That something is changing. If there are not PPPs anymore or no PFIs anymore, then what's happening? Well, this is also happening. McKinsey had a big investigation worldwide in 2018, a report, and they, I don't know if you can read this, they concluded in the summary that not the solution, but a big part of the solution for the construction industry in order to perform better is early contractor involvement, ECI. That means that you work together in the design phase with the contractor in order to make a good contract, good set of requirements, good drawings, etc., before you start the execution phase. And that's new. That's also new for my colleagues, for instance, because then I have to work. Normally, I design, that's it, and when my design is ready, I go to the contractor. And now you say, no, I'm having the design phase, and I'm working together with the contractor and use his knowledge and his expertise in order to make a better design. And McKinsey says the same. So they say you should involve the contractor already in the design phase, early contractor involvement. And they also say, let him make a profit. Don't try to make it as cheap as possible. Don't use the procurement phase just to get the price down as low as possible. Don't do that. It's not the good incentive, it's the wrong start of a successful project, because you'll end up probably in a fight over quality, over money. Just let him make a normal margin. And look at a reasonable risk sharing. Don't try to shift all the risk to the contractor. Make a balanced risk diversion in the contract. And last but not least, they also said, the key is with the clients. The clients should start this development. They would have to make the first step into this development. So the clients should decide, we're going to do ECI, and then it'll work. Important message for me. And what I can say, that's the Dutch situation. We are already, we are doing this, and we call this bouwteam, ECI. It's the same principle. Just involve the contractor in the design phase and work with him until the design is of good quality. And we made a new set of standards published in May 2019, and it's an update of an old type of contract, and it's also now applicable to integrated contracts. So it's, we're now working on it, gathering all the comments, and we are wanting to publish this in November as a new set of standards for ECI. Unfortunately, it's only Dutch, so perhaps it'll be translated in English, we don't know yet. But anyway, this is what's going on in Holland, and there's a lot of attention, especially clients, also government clients, for this way of working, because it has a very positive image at the moment. It's really, well, the new way of working together in order to solve all these problems, because also in Holland we have a big challenge in the coming years. And how do you procure a contractor? How do you procure that in the right way? Well, this is my favorite picture. This is meat. This is a cow, just very near our main office in Holland. And this is what you should have in mind as a sound form of meat. But of course, this is not meat. Meat stands for most economically advantageous tender. And it simply means don't use only price, but also use other elements in awarding your contract. That's what you should do. And then we also say, that's also the policy of EFCA, price should actually be only 30% of the weight in the total meat matrix. Now, going to the challenges we face in climate change, this could be helpful. This is what we have written from EFCA, how to derive meat criteria. This is a guidance, a 5-step approach in order to make a good set of meat criteria that you can use in your procurement procedure. And that's the guidance. It is finished. We are waiting. I'm only daring to say this. A guy from the European Commission wanted to make a preface, but he is making a preface now for 8 months, I think, Jan? Yeah, something like that. So we're still waiting on him to make the preface, but if you want to have the text, it is available, and go to our secretariat or go to Jan, and you can have you can then download it. It's a guidance. And if you use the guidance and you combine it with the climate change measures we should take, look at the SDGs. Look at the 17 SDGs, and you can easily do that. A very simple example was just 2 weeks ago, the province of Overijssel, and they used meat and they used SDG, and they said, this is what you should do. If you want to win the procedure, you have to add value to number 3, 9, and 15. So 3 elements of the SDGs, and they are part of the meat, and they are weighting, I think, 50% or something. So a lot of emphasis on these SDGs in order to gain the contract. And it's just one example. There's already a leaflet from Denmark, which gives examples of 39 projects, all using SDGs in their meat. So you have a better project and you have a positive effect on climate change. So my message again, procurement is the key to change. If you want to change as a government, of course you have to obey the directives, but they can be used very well. It's not that they are very legally binding. There's a lot of freedom actually in these procurement rules, and they are the key to change. If you want to change the way you work in a project, use the procurement rules in the right way, use meat, and then you'll have a good project. So the key to change, and if you do it the right way, you can also work together in a team and perform in the best in your projects. Thank you very much.